All right, thanks for having us. My name is Ilya, this is Ashok. We are co-founders of PAXAFE, where we are building smart packaging technology for high-value products. Our mission is to improve global shipment outcomes by protecting high-value shipments through the supply chain. So a little bit about us and our experiences and backgrounds. I actually started my career with Cummins. I used to build out global supply chain strategies all over the world. Industrial manufacturing company. Has anybody ever had a Dodge Ram? Okay, you're probably familiar with the Cummins engine. After Cummins, I went on and did about 3 years living out of a suitcase, working for Big Four management consulting firms. So I worked for PwC, KPMG, and now today I am a co-founder and CEO of PAXAFE.
I'm the complete opposite. I come from a startup world. The last 5 years I've been focused on building hardware startups. My background is in mechanical and biomedical engineering. Before starting PAXAFE, I had my own company right out of grad school with a couple of friends from Brown, working on a company called Orthopedics. It was a medical device startup focused on making orthopedic custom breast implants using 3D printing technology. So that company went through an acquisition late 2017, and as things were wrapping up, I met Ilya and started PAXAFE.
And we do have one more person as part of our core team. He's obviously not here today. His name is Ma. He is our CTO. He's a tech wizard. Over 20 years of experience in big tech, most recently Amazon. Does have an MBA from Booth School of Business. So Ashok oversees a lot of the mechanical engineering. Ma is software development, and I am pretty much everything else. So this is PAXAFE. At PAXAFE, we've developed a smart, all-in-one hardware and software packaging IoT solution that integrates security, chain of custody, real-time communication, and a software portal that ties in supply chain data insights and analytics and actually helps automate key portions of the packaging workflow. So essentially, anytime you're shipping anything really valuable, you're going to want to put it in a PAXAFE. So it helps protect against theft, product theft, counterfeit, product loss, and product damage. And with that, we are actually very happy to share today that we no longer have to use this beautiful mock-up as our go-to for a visual. As of last week, we have finished our development of our alpha unit prototype. So here it is. And for the people in the back, it is going into customer testing starting next week, so we're really excited about that. But more importantly, why are we here today? We're here to talk about some of the challenges that hardware startups and founders face early on in the journey. So, is anybody here? Does anybody come from hardware, or has anybody had experience working with hardware products? All right, 1, 2, maybe 5 people can probably share our pain to some extent. So we are new to Milwaukee. Ashok and I moved here. We came here at the end of last year. We actually went through the Generator Accelerator program here in Milwaukee. Shout out to the Generator group in the back. Had a great experience. One of the best decisions we've made. Yeah, as any responsible and broke entrepreneurs, we decided to live together and room together and save on rent for this first year. So this is us, 3 weeks in. We don't have a couch, we don't have a table. My dog has a nicer bed than I do, and it's because hardware startups are expensive. And when you have to choose between having a nice furniture set or having an alpha unit out on time, sometimes the startup has to win. So if you don't believe me, you can take Juicero's word for it. Juicero was a hardware startup. They've raised $400 million in venture capital, 120 million of which was raised and used before they shipped their first product to their first customer. And for any hardware geeks in here, this was a beautiful piece of technology. It had 8 machine parts. For those that are at least a little familiar with hardware, it's customary for a hardware product to probably at this size have maybe 1 or 2. It had 8 machine parts. It had built-in Wi-Fi. It had a built-in camera for a QR code reader. It had a custom PCB, custom power supply, beautiful hardware with features. And they had spent a ton of time and money actually engineering a way to get even power and even force distribution onto those little tiny packets to squeeze out the juice as efficiently as possible. And one thing, $120 million later, that they didn't account for was the user element, the user experience element. You don't need a $700 juicer to squeeze out the contents of a packet. So lessons learned, we don't have the luxury of playing around with $120 million today, but we do have the luxury to learn from other hardware startup mistakes. And what we want to talk about with you today are some of the lessons learned and challenges that we faced on the product development side of starting PAXAFE.
Thanks, Ilya. So I gather most of the folks here are from software background. So we all know software product development has a predefined process map that you can follow to create a product. But this is incomplete for most hardware startups. And most hardware startups, including us at first, we're following a method similar to this. We call it the error environment. We literally do stuff just to get it done without any preset or predefined process. But what we soon learned is that hardware startups are pretty hard, and you have to have a really good plan in place, just because the sheer number of things you have to get done before launching the product in the market. So any of these steps could have long lead times or could be expensive if you do it in the wrong order. And a small mistake in either the design or one of the quality control part could either bankrupt the company or you won't have a product in the market within the given timeline. So it's pretty hard to do a hardware startup. So in order to overcome the challenge, we followed a product development method proposed by Bolt.io. It's a venture firm out of Boston. They focus on hardware startups. And this method has been implemented by many successful hardware startups. To put it simply, it's a hybrid model that combines heavy-handed process prescribed by manufacturing community, as well as a lightweight process proposed by design people or design professionals. So it's a combination of both, which has 4 different phases, starting from ideation, design, engineering, and validation. So the initial phase, ideation, it starts from defining the scope of the problem and ends with creating the proof of concept prototype. So at PAXAFE, we started the ideation by talking to our potential customers and learning what the problem is at first. And we started creating our first product, you see on the left, which is a smart container which has a temperature control unit built in, which can be used for shipping cold chain pharmaceuticals. And as we were moving towards proof of concept development, what we learned was the complexity and the regulatory hurdles we have to come through in order to launch the product in the market. So we literally had to go back to the drawing board and ask ourselves in terms of how much resources are we willing to spend, how much time are we going to spend in developing a product that may or may not go to market in the next 2 years. So we had to cut down some of the feature set, and we came up with a new product offering which just included the security feature and the tracking feature, excluding the temperature control. And we went back to our customers, did the whole customer discovery interview again, and learned that there is a really good need or an application for this particular product in shipping high-value goods, which are not temperature controlled. That's how PAXAFE came to be. So once we had the proof of concept developed, we went on to the next phase, which is a design phase. Here, more customer discovery interviews, and then you have to create wireframes, mock-ups of how the product will look and how the customers will interact with those products. So that's this phase. So in this phase, we use tools which are almost free or low cost, like InMotion, Lucid Charts, and SolidWorks, because we don't want to spend a ton of money before getting the right product market fit, or going to a contract manufacturer at this stage before getting enough customer validation. So with InMotion, we're able to create, since you guys are all software background, we're able to create mock-ups, at least the front end without the back end, to give the real user experience of the software product. And for the hardware, you use SolidWorks to create CAD models and renderings, which looks more like the finished product. So the customers don't have to take a huge mental leap of how the product will end up once it's done. So we went through, again, the whole customer discovery process and got more validation. So once that's done, we jumped on to the next phase, which is the engineering phase. It's the most fun phase in the whole product dev, as well as a critical phase, where you have to make sure you have all the functionalities right, and make sure you're building a product which is cost efficient when you go into manufacturing. So we started the phase with laying out a well-defined spec sheet. And the spec sheet is fluid, it's ever evolving as we go through the product development cycle, because things change. We need to adapt to all the changes and all the components that's available. And when we started building the prototype, we didn't want to spend a lot of money in making like custom parts or custom molds. So we used off-the-shelf components. Pretty much everything that we have is off-the-shelf. Even the case that you see here is 3D printed. It's not injection molded, which is more expensive to do and time-consuming. So this cut down our product development timeline by literally 50 to 60% from what we initially projected. And we finally have a product that's functional and we can take for any alpha testing in the next couple of weeks. So it wasn't all straightforward in terms of building this product. There were a lot of challenges in terms of engineering issues that we came across. One such example is, you see the camera on the front. We had a debate whether to have the camera on the front or the top. And they both had their own advantages and disadvantages. And we chose to go with the front camera because it had a wider field of view. And it was easier to translate the design from this phase to the next manufacturing phase. And at the same time, it provided us with the right image every time when the user was handling the product, because the UX meant a lot when we were designing this particular feature. So this is one of the engineering issues that we came across, but there were a lot of unforeseen problems that occurred during product development, which we never accounted for. One such example is the modem that we're using. This communicates, or this pretty much enables the communication between the hardware and the online portal. What we didn't account for is this modem we got from a really well-vetted vendor, which came highly recommended. It was working fine until the last minute where it stopped communicating to the network, through the LTE network, because there was an issue with the third-party network provider, not the modem itself. So we literally had to go back, which put a dent on our timeline by 2 weeks. We had to go back and look for a new modem. They had a different model, which was a 3G network, which was on 3G network. But our bad luck, they didn't have that in stock. It was out of stock, and they had long lead times for, I think, close to 3 weeks. So we reached out to them. They came back to us. They said they had a couple of modems available, and they'll have the rest available in the next couple of weeks. So we had to go through back channels to get that particular modem and complete the product. So what I'm trying to say is it's always good to be prepared for any unforeseen circumstances that can occur with especially hardware development. And it's always good to have backups in place for any components that you're using when we go into manufacturing. So as Ilya mentioned, we just finished our alpha unit and we're going to testing soon next week. With that, we're also stepping into the manufacturing realm, which, since given the time frame, I'm not going to go into the detail, but I'm just going to touch base on key things that we are looking at when we start manufacturing. So the first one being lead time, as I mentioned in the previous slide. It's always good to have a good sense of what the lead times will be for different components we're using. Supply chain sourcing strategy. This is important when we have offshore manufacturing partners, because sometimes the shipping and managing the supply chain takes forever, and you have to account that into your product timeline. And logistics, this is when you have more than one contract manufacturers working on different components of the product, and you have to get all those components into a final assembly center, which could again add time to your total timeline. And certification, if you have any regulatory certification or any other FCC certification, since we're using Wi-Fi, it has to be transported on a plane. That needs to be done before we can ship the product, before we can launch the product in the market. And it's always good to have a good quality assurance and quality control systems in place, just so that you don't see any unforeseen failures when it's being used in the field. And finally, the sales cycle. So the sales cycle is important, especially for a B2B company, because when you start talking to enterprise clients, they usually take anywhere from 6 to 12 months to get back to you or to close the deal. So it's always good to start engaging them while you're going through this product development process. So key things that to look at when manufacturing. With that, I would let Ilya complete the presentation.
Okay, so ultimately, this isn't Ashok's first rodeo. Obviously, Ashok has already had a company that went through an exit. I have not. We've been doing this particular startup for the last 4 to 5 months or so. So while this is not the end-all advice, this is what we've experienced thus far in our journey as far as some of the takeaways and do's and don'ts pertaining to hardware startups. So starting with the don'ts, don't boil the ocean. When it comes to product features, etc., I don't know how many times we've been approached one-off by various customers or investors asking if we had a customer ask if we're gonna build in a scale so that they can detect any weight shifting from the package. Today we had an investor ask if we were gonna come out with a low-cost version of this device. And while some of these suggestions and ideas might hold merit, it's important to stay focused on the task at hand and get a product to market. Secondarily, I think Ashok's already mentioned this, don't invest in tooling prematurely because you will probably definitely go through changes on your product design, and then it will be wasted. Functionality, focus on functionality over aesthetics first. And finally, don't try to be everything to everyone. Ashok had mentioned, we started off in the healthcare industry. We had some serious interest from healthcare providers. We had a call last year. We went out to Denmark and met with one of the largest shippers in the world, Maersk. They had asked if we would be willing to get into to retrofit some of the product and go into the food space, shipping of food. And the point is, here we are with jewelry and money and high-end items. So we can't be everything to everyone. We have to go after where the market demand is, and that's what we're doing. As far as what we do recommend doing is, first, before investing in any sort of tooling or really any sort of product dev, doing enough customer development to understand the demand levers from your customer base. Secondarily, focusing on customer relationship depth versus breadth. We understood, early on, we started having some interest come in through our PAXAFE inbox from various customers. We had to delineate between which customers were a strategic fit for PAXAFE and which were one-offs that were going to be distracting. Right now it's only 3 of us, so we don't have the luxury of being able to go after everyone. Don't be afraid to outsource key areas of your team that you don't have on board. So we, of course, are early stage. We can't afford to hire anyone and everyone that we want. Ashok brings the mechanical expertise. We have Ma bringing the technology. I'm business and finance. We have a severe weakness in electrical engineering, and we've outsourced a considerable amount of engineering work to help us get this alpha unit prototype across the finish line. We also recommend investing in doing a formal FMEA for failure mode effects analysis as part of the Six Sigma framework. It will save you time and money down the road if you're ever considering going into a hardware startup. Do get a tangible product into your customer's hands as quickly as possible, and then continue to iterate. And then finally, highly recommend joining a top-tier accelerator if you can. We had, as I mentioned, the pleasure of going through Generator. I'll go ahead and give a plug for Danny. Danny over there is an excellent program manager. He was, Danny, you can stand up if you want. So he was our program manager through the cohort. He was excellent. He does have office hours for G-Beta. G-Beta is basically a pre-seed version of Generator Accelerator next week. Check him out online on the Generator